The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Deanna Jordan. A very good morning to you. To begin the news, first the lead stories. There are mixed views about the proposed life sentence and a $10 million fine for a number of election offenses. The government is hoping to keep the price of rice down by getting fertilizer at a cheaper price. Regionally, Suriname has destroyed thousands of COVID vaccines. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, which results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now the news in detail. The opposition, Alliance for Change, AFC, and a new and united Guyana, ANUG, disagree with the $10 million Guyana fine and life imprisonment for a number of election offenses. However, the government says attempts to cheat an election amount to the toppling of an elected government. ANUG chairman, attorney at law Timothy Jonas, says the proposed amendments to the Representation of the People Act are crafted as strict liability offenses rather than in a way that allows a court to determine whether accused persons have knowledge or intent to commit an offense.
There is nothing here that talks about knowingly or fraudulently or with knowledge. This is strict liability. That goes past draconian. That is representative of the culture in our society that makes us think that if we have a heavy hand, we can stop crime.
Touching on concerns about the introduction of strict liability offenses, Attorney General Anil Nandlal says if a law is silent on intention, the court is required to read to consider that factor. He says Guyana has a history of election rigging by the People's National Congress reform. Mr. Nandlal says the penalties, which go as far as a $10 million Guyana fine and life imprisonment, are needed because such election-related offenses are tantamount to toppling an elected government.
That is analogous to a lawful government being overthrown by tyrants. That is the legal analogy that I want to draw. When the democratic will of the people is denied and those who are not elected are imposed as a government, it is akin to a coup d'etat unlawfully. When that happens, persons who commit those types of offenses are charged with offenses of treason and related offenses. Do you know what is the penalty for that? Death. Death is the penalty for treason.
Attorney General Anil Nandlal. Mr. Jonas says the most important amendment should be to allow for the posting of the statements of poll on the website of the Guyana Elections Commission, as that will discourage election officials from tampering with the results.
You should immediately put this statement up on a website for everybody to see, for me to see, for you, the media to see, for both political parties to see. So that contemporaneously, live, the same day as it is being counted, you count in your 800 votes in your place of poll, I counted my 500 in mine. It is going up and it is being tabulated live. Use the technology, have it up live, and that will diffuse any nonsensical attempts when it becomes more centralized and all these statements of poll now go to one individual who can corrupt it, it makes his life much more difficult. Because when he is going through his process of collating these statements of poll, the whole country knows the result already.
Chairman of a new and united Guyana, Timothy Jonas. Contender for the post of leader of the People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, Dr. Richard Van West Charles, does not support creating a slate to contest internal elections of his party. He says the system of slates creates further division in the party.
When I put up a slate, I am sending a message that I'm separating these set of people from those. I must be able to work with all of our comrades who have been elected by way of the democratic process. And we work as a team in the interest of the party and its leadership and its function to represent the issues of the people. But I don't subscribe to a slate.
Dr. Charles dismisses suggestions that he is opposed to the creation of slates because he does not have sufficient support to do so.
No. Look, I do not subscribe to it. I do not, because I believe slates are in many ways the genesis of factions. I don't subscribe to it. I could put together a slate. I have walked the length and breadth of this country. I know people all over the country. But I refuse to do it because I believe it is the genesis of factions. And where we are at the moment, I do not agree with it.
Rivals Joseph Harmon and Aubrey Nerton have put together slates to contest the PNCR's elections, slated to be held during its long-awaited biennial delegates conference scheduled for December 11, 2021. The government says it is working feverishly to avoid an increase in the price of rice. The U.S. spot price of urea fertilizer has more than doubled in recent months. But President Irfan Ali at the weekend said that the government has been negotiating the purchase of urea at a lower price to prevent an increase in the price of rice.
Your government is actively pursuing bilateral discussions to have a direct import of fertilizer. That is what the government is doing at this moment. The last 4 weeks, we have initiated discussion with many of our bilateral partners directly to get the fertilizer in to minimize the impact of this increase. And we're doing this so that the farmers, the sugar industry, the rice producers, they can all benefit. Because if we don't bring down the cost, we know too that the cost of rice, the final product, will also increase.
At the same time, the president is appealing to businesses not to increase the prices of goods while buying inputs at cheaper prices and receiving financial support from the government.
This is not a global crisis that anyone should look at profiteering off. No, you have a greater responsibility to the society, and you should not look at profiteering. We are in this together. Your government will confront these challenges with strong, workable measures. But we also need the support of all the stakeholders.
President Irfan Ali. 2 men are in police custody in connection with the killing of a 54-year-old man at Block D Bath Settlement, West Coast, Berbice. Investigators say the Beam Evans of 11 squatting area, West Coast Berbice, was killed late Saturday night. Police say that Evans' son was on his way home when he was attacked at Block D Bath Settlement by the suspects who were armed with a cutlass, rope and chain. They reportedly told him that his father entered the home of one of the suspects and stole his jewelry. Police say that the son was lashed several times to his head, face and back. Crime scene detectives also say that the suspects eventually found Evans and lashed him several times, even as they demanded the stolen items from him. After Evans denied knowing about the jewelry, police say the two men wrapped him in a 1-ton rice sack and dragged him 300 feet into another street at Bath Settlement and told his son to take him home. Police say they were summoned and Evans was picked up in an unconscious condition and taken to the Fort Wellington Hospital, where he died while receiving treatment. And now in regional news. Suriname has destroyed more than 9,500 doses of COVID vaccines. Star News quotes the coordinator of the National Coordination Team, NCT, Javier Asin, as saying that he regrets that the vaccines have been destroyed because a lot of money has been spent. The Sinopharm vaccine has a shelf life until 2023. Despite the option to choose from 4 brands of vaccines and the facilities that have been put in place to accommodate society, large groups of people continue to doubt or refuse to protect themselves against the coronavirus with the vaccines. Asin fears that if things continue like this, people may soon no longer be able to choose which vaccine they want to protect themselves with, and that donors will no longer want to donate vaccines to Suriname. He says, as long as Suriname remains below a 40% vaccination rate, more persons will fall sick with COVID. Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda and the CARICOM chairman Gaston Brown has urged Caribbean leaders to let go of the fear of repercussions and pursue a legal path to climate change funding. Brown made the call during the final show of COP26, Now or Never, on CNC3 on Friday night. His government has formed a commission on climate change based on international law, seeking to take action against large polluting countries to become legally responsible for their emissions. In his address at the COP26 summit in Glasgow on November 1st, Brown told the world that the difference between small island developing states and industrialized nations is the capacity to respond. He says it takes a single storm a few hours to destroy the economy and infrastructure of an entire small island state which lacks the necessary financial and other resources to rebound and rebuild. Brown said regional leaders must take a stand and not act out of fear that the international community will victimize them. He expressed disappointment that none of his fellow CARICOM leaders has so far volunteered to agree to take legal action. While the economies of Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Suriname are heavily dependent on oil and gas, the carbon footprint of small island developing states accounts for 1% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, has announced plans to revoke the state of emergency. Speaking during a media conference at the weekend, the Prime Minister said that he will do so in Parliament on Wednesday. The Caribbean Media Corporation reports that he, however, noted that the public health ordinance will continue to be enforced, including mandatory mask wearing in public spaces. He says Trinidad and Tobago will continue to manage the vaccinated population and the unvaccinated population under the public health ordinance. However, public gatherings will remain at 10 and public fetes and parties in all forms will remain prohibited, while party boats and nightclubs will remain closed. The consumption of alcohol in public places will also remain banned. He also stated that the current arrangements for schools will remain in place. Now for the international news, the latest coming from the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Debbie Russ with the BBC News. Germany has warned Belarus that the European Union is far from the end of the spiral of sanctions it could impose. Speaking ahead of a meeting with its EU counterparts, the German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said airlines taking migrants to Belarus could be banned from landing in the EU. The EU Foreign Policy Chief, Josep Borrell, said a number of new sanctions would now be brought in.
Today we are going to approve a new package of sanctions against Belarusian people responsible for what's happening in the country. And we are going to enlarge the framework in order to implement other sanctions to other people, airlines, travel agencies, and everybody involved on this illegal push of migrants in our borders.
Iraq says it's organising a voluntary repatriation flight this Thursday for citizens stuck on the Poland-Belarus border. A spokesman said 570 Iraqis would like to return home. The United Arab Emirates has barred Afghan, Syrian, Yemeni and Iraqi citizens from flights to Minsk. Last week, the Belarusian state airline announced it would no longer fly citizens of those countries from Turkey to Belarus. A new report accuses Europe of creating a hostile environment for human rights groups working with migrants. The report, published by the World Health Organization Against Torture and the Observatory for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders, says government policies to deter migration and seal borders have taken priority over the duty to save lives. Imogen Folks is in Geneva.
The new report concludes that there has been a deliberate criminalisation of solidarity. Some human rights groups have been forced to shut down. In Greece this week, 24 activists go on trial. The charges against them include human trafficking, money laundering, and even spying. European governments often claim that helping migrants simply encourages more to come. Human rights groups point to the fundamental duty to save life.
The authorities in the Indian capital Delhi says they're ready to impose a complete lockdown to combat worsening air pollution. The response came at a Supreme Court hearing where judges directed India's federal government and the Delhi state government to address the chief causes of air pollution, including coal-burning power plants and road traffic. Our correspondent in the capital is Rajini Vajanardan.
In particular, concern is over levels of what they call PM 2.5, and they're the tiny particles that you can breathe in and they can sort of stay lodged in your lungs. They can lead to respiratory illnesses and serious health conditions. But I think the thing that really is one of the questions many people here in Delhi ask is why isn't anything changing?
World News from the BBC. The mayor of the English city of Liverpool has praised a taxi driver as heroic for his efforts to limit the impact of an explosion in his vehicle. Mayor Joanne Anderson said the driver got out of his cab and locked the doors just before the blast that killed his only passenger. 3 men have been arrested under the Terrorism Act in connection with the incident. The Anglo-Dutch energy giant Royal Dutch Shell says it will move its tax residency from the Netherlands to Britain and give up its dual share structure. The group also plans to drop Royal Dutch from its name and move its top executives to the UK. Shell says the changes are designed to strengthen its competitiveness. A Dutch minister said the announcement came as an unpleasant surprise. The Women's Tennis Association has called for a fair and transparent investigation into sexual assault allegations made by a Chinese player against one of the country's former top leaders. Our East Asia editor Michael Bristow reports.
Peng Shuai said she'd been coerced into having sex with Zhang Gaoli, who used to be a member of China's Politburo's Standing Committee. After that, she had an on-off relationship with him. The WTA, the principal organising body for women's tennis, has issued a statement saying she'd shown courage to come forward and deserved to be heard. But in China, there's virtually no public criticism of its leaders, and neither the government nor Mr. Zhang have addressed the allegations, which have been scrubbed from the Chinese internet. The tennis star has not been heard from since.
Michael Bristow reporting. The Pacific island nation of Kiribati has defended a plan to open the world's largest marine reserve to commercial fishing. It's rejected criticism that has come under pressure from China to do so. The government said the World Heritage status listing had cost Kiribati tens of millions of dollars in lost revenue. Kiribati switched diplomatic recognition from Taiwan to China in 2019. BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now to end the news, here's a recap of the leads. There are mixed views about the proposed life sentence and $10 million fine for a number of election offenses. The government is hoping to keep the price of rice down by getting fertilizer at a cheaper price. And in regional news, Suriname has destroyed thousands of COVID vaccines. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.